Did you know that the war in Ukraine reaches other continents? And no, in this case, I'm not referring to all the countries that have sent aid to Zelensky's government, of which there are many. This time we're talking about the people who are risking their lives on the front lines. On the Ukrainian side, as you know, we can find international battalions formed with people from a mix of different backgrounds. There is also a battalion of Belarusians, and even one of Russians, who are fractious with Putin. But it's not just about Ukraine. On the side of Putin's troops, things are not much different. Nepalese, Serbs, Bosnians, and of course, citizens of all those post-Soviet republics that emerged after the fall of the Soviet Union. The result is that more than a few foreigners have joined Russia in its invasion of Ukraine in exchange for money. For the time being, these are not forces officially sent by other countries, but more or less volunteer troops. But what if I told you that this may be about to change? Take a look at this news item.
North Korea sends workers to Russia-occupied territory in eastern Ukraine.
They are not soldiers, at least for the time being, but it's estimated that at least a few hundreds of North Korean workers are already in the occupied Donetsk and Luhansk regions to lend a hand in the reconstruction work. Although this may seem trivial, it may be the prelude to a much more important movement.
Elite North Korea military trainees visit Russia amid deepening ties.
Again, this might seem to us like unimportant news. However, the connections between Pyongyang and Moscow are getting stronger and stronger. And if there is one thing the North Korean dictatorship can export, it is precisely that: ammunition, workers, and soldiers. And many military analysts point to a major shift that may occur in the coming months. North Korea could send troops to support the Russian rearguard in Ukraine, or at least they could be ready to do so when Putin gave the order. So the question is, what indications do these analysts have for such a scenario? Well, first of all, because the return of US military aid to Ukraine is hitting the Russians again, with much heavier casualties on the front lines. And secondly, because Putin and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un signed a disturbing security agreement in the middle of June. An agreement that, obviously, in the midst of war, does not come about by pure chance. According to this agreement, if either country were attacked by a third party, the other would come to its defense. Something similar to the famous Article 5 of NATO. And that's not all. The agreement also proposes cooperation between the two countries in fields such as nuclear energy, trade, and well, also in other areas such as space exploration, among many other things. The point is that these countries seem to be preparing the ground to justify a possible North Korean intervention in Ukraine. To top it off, North Korea has pledged to send, if it hasn't already, between 3 and 4 brigades of military engineers to Donetsk, almost half of the total of such brigades the Asian country has. In exchange for what? An annual payment of $115 million from Russia that will go straight into the pockets of the North Korean regime. As you can imagine, these moves have set off the alarm bells. What is really brewing between North Korea and Russia? What are the North Koreans doing in Ukraine? What is Pyongyang getting from Moscow in return? And more importantly, how far could these agreements go? Well, we're going to tell you all this and more coming up.
Rocket Man to the rescue.
Despite all the hype that swarms the networks, one thing is certain. Russia would have had a very difficult time sustaining its war effort in Ukraine had it not been for foreign aid. We're talking, for example, about Iranian Shahed drones or Chinese electronic components that have also been instrumental in enabling Russia to produce between 400 and 500 indigenous drones every month. However, the big problem the Russians had is that artillery consumption in Ukraine was getting so astronomically high it was far outstripping their production capabilities. And this despite the fact that according to data from Russia, let me stress here, from Russia, they could produce around 3 million 122mm and 152mm artillery rounds by 2024. Yet even if we were to take the Moscow data at face value, it would not be enough. Here on VisualPolitik, we've already told you how the war in Ukraine has basically turned into a giant artillery field. We're talking about Russia firing every day, on average, a crazy 10,000 artillery rounds, which is almost 4 million artillery rounds in just 1 year. It's evident that with the current production, they don't have enough. And do you know how they are solving it? Bingo.
North Korea sent Russia millions of artillery shells, South Korea says.
North Korea is becoming a key player in the Ukrainian war as a supplier of armaments. In fact, some claim that they have already sent 1.6 million artillery pieces to Russia, although other analyses put the figure even higher and speak of 2, 3, and even 5 million rounds. The fact is that, according to South Korean intelligence sources, the number of containers full of ammunition arriving by ship to Russia from North Korea is in the thousands.
South Korean defense chief says North Korea has supplied 7,000 containers of munitions to Russia.
Crazy. And it doesn't end there. The North Koreans are also providing Putin with ballistic missiles. By the way, there is already evidence that they've been used in actual attacks in Ukraine. In fact, one of the things that South Korea and also the United States are most concerned about is that the use of North Korean missiles in Ukraine will allow Pyongyang to improve and optimize them with the money, data, and information being passed to them by the Russians. For example, North Korean missiles are known to have a rather poor evasion system and even frequently have trouble penetrating targets. But now, Pyongyang is achieving two important things: money to invest in this technology and data. Lots of data on their use in a real war scenario, which, as you can imagine, is a big problem for the South Koreans and the Japanese, who until now have been counting on the technology to fail like a fairground shotgun. This is important when in Pyongyang they are not exactly twiddling their thumbs.
North Korea test launches 2 ballistic missiles after end of new US-South Korea-Japan drill.
Of course, North Korea has seen the opportunity and is therefore supplying the Russians with the best they have in their short-range catalogue. We're talking about the upgraded Hwasong-11 missile in its KN-23 and KN-24 variants, developed between 2018 and 2019. A missile that, by the way, we already told you about in a past video on VisualPolitik. North Korea has a new missile capable of attacking with relative precision at any point in South Korea. We're talking about the KN-23 missile. The KN-23 is a solid fuel missile that has been tested several times since 2019. It could be launched from trains, trucks, or even submarines. For those of you who want to know more about the North Korean missile program, don't miss this video. We'll leave you the link in the description. Now, having said that, and getting back to the topic at hand in this video, Russia is believed to have already fired at least 20 of these missiles in recent months. Missiles that boast a strike range of up to 900 kilometers. So, how do you know that such missiles are being fired? Well, you see, the Ukrainian authorities have analyzed the remains of missiles launched earlier in 2024. Well, apart from the fact that there were letters of the Korean Hangul alphabet on some pieces, there were also inscriptions with the number 112. Look at the picture. But what the heck does 112 mean? Well, 112 corresponds to the year 2023 in the Juche calendar, the North Korean regime's own calendar. It tells us the date on which these missiles were supposedly manufactured. The first North Korean KN-23 was launched by Russia 2 days before the end of 2024. It was a real failure. The missile fell in a field outside the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia. And although there is debate as to whether the failure was due to Ukrainian defenses or a possible software glitch in the missile itself, the fact is that the other KN-23s launched by Russia have managed to cause many more casualties. But the worst thing, the great risk VisualPolitik community, is that the Ukrainian war ends up becoming a kind of showcase and laboratory for North Korean weapons. Think about it. If these weapons are improved and end up being successful in combat, don't you think this would further embolden the Pyongyang regime in its international pressure policy campaign? Don't you think North Korea would gain new customers? Of course, most of them would be banana republics, but even so, if that were to happen, Kim Jong-un's regime could get a lot more money with which to invest even more in its own missile program. You know that in North Korea, the military is of the utmost importance. Now, with all that we are telling you, some of you may be wondering, but Josh, how on earth can North Korean weapons of this kind reach Ukraine? Isn't Kim Jong-un's regime supposed to be heavily sanctioned, and its trade tightly controlled? Well, you see, it's much simpler than it looks. The weapons leave from the North Korean port of Ra-Sin on dark ships, in other words, unidentified vessels, and travel to the Russian port of Vostochny. It's estimated that at least 20 such ships have already arrived in Russia, packed to the brim with weapons, and by now there are likely to be many more. Then Then, from there, the Russians put the weapons on the trucks and trains to send them to the front. It takes some time, but it's straightforward. Now, all that North Korea is doing to help Putin in his criminal invasion of Ukraine obviously has nothing to do with any courageous gesture of ideological solidarity or anything like that. It's the other way around. All the weapons sent by the Kim regime have had a corresponding reward. And now, with the new security agreement between Moscow and Pyongyang, the pot could get even bigger. Now, what exactly is North Korea getting? Does it all boil down to a few $100 million? Well, cold.
The best deal for Kim.
VisualPolitik community, favors are returned. And that goes for North Korea's cooperation with Russia too. In return for the steady flow of containers full of weapons and ammunition, Russia is paying the Asian country in different ways. Check it out.
Russia sending North Korea food in return for arms, Seoul defense chief. White House. Russia supplies North Korea with fuel above UN cap.
Indeed, Russia is not only paying Kim Jong-un with money, it's also sending food and oil in much larger quantities than usual. And while this may not seem like a big deal, for Pyongyang, it's a successful business. Keep in mind that the country is going through its worst food crisis since the famine of the 1990s, when, according to some sources, famine claimed the lives of up to 3 million people. On top of that, oil is a scarce commodity in the country due to United Nations sanctions. The North Koreans can only legally import 500,000 barrels a year, and although they usually manage to import more than twice that amount through smuggling on the high seas, the quantities are still small, and obviously, oil powers cars, factories, airplanes, and of course, tanks. So crude oil shortages are a serious problem in the country. However, now that Moscow has moved beyond international norms, it has no impediment in bypassing all UN restrictions on Pyongyang. What's more, Putin himself has helped his new best friend Kim to hide and circumvent non-compliance, not only with the sanctions, but also with the other rules that prohibit North Korea from importing luxury goods, coal, metal, and thousands of other items. In fact, just a few months ago, Russia vetoed the renewal of the mandate of the UN panel of experts that monitors North Korea's compliance with sanctions. And obviously, do any of you really think that this did not have a motive beyond simply helping an old friend? Well, naturally, these kinds of gestures are part of a payment, part of a much larger deal in exchange for their help against Ukraine. In fact, it's something they don't even bother to hide. Check it out.
Putin says Russia may deliver weapons to North Korea.
Indeed, Putin has made this clear. Russia could bypass the sanctions on North Korea and directly provide them with weapons and military technology. This would be the answer to the green light given not long ago by the United States to Ukraine, so that it could use its weapons to attack military installations on Russian territory. Following the new security agreement signed between Moscow and Pyongyang, all analysts are clear. North Korea will receive weapons and technology with which to improve its own military programs. John Kirby, the spokesman for the US National Security Council, has said that North Korea wants Russia to provide it with armored vehicles, surface-to-air missiles, and fighter jets. In the very meeting that Kim and Putin held in Russia last November, the North Korean dictator was interested in replacing his old fighters, such as the Sukhoi Su-25 and the MiG-21 and 23, with more modern ones, such as the Sukhoi Su-35. And keep an eye on this, because the lousy air force North Korea has in service is one of the South Koreans' greatest advantages in the event of a conflict. The Soviet antiquities operated by North Korea are so old and in such poor condition that it would be extremely easy for the South Koreans to achieve complete air superiority in the blink of an eye. However, if Russia provides Pyongyang with modern Russian fighters, this could become more complicated, and it's only natural that such a scenario would be of great concern to Seoul. On top of that, it's also believed that Russia could work with North Korea to get North Korea to militarize its nuclear warheads, which can stay aloft for 10,000 kilometers and pass through the atmosphere without the bomb disintegrating or being deflected. These are all technologies that the Russians already have, but that the North Koreans lack. And do you know what this means? It is just what Pyongyang needs to be able to seriously threaten a nuclear attack on the continental United States itself, something they can't do today, and which would certainly change the military situation in the Pacific completely. So far, there is no indication that Russia has sent modern weaponry to Pyongyang, but what is known is that they have helped them put their first spy satellite into orbit and to launch a few more satellites.
North Korea's latest satellites rely on Russian technical assistance, experts say.
And now let me ask you a question. Given this scenario, how would you feel if you were part of the Japanese government or the South Korean government? I'm sure you'd be worried, to say the least. In fact, with the possibility of Russia sending weapons and helping the North Korean government to improve its own, Seoul has begun to consider something that, until now, was totally ruled out, precisely so as to not provoke such a situation. What could it be? Exactly, sending weapons directly to Ukraine. And believe me when I tell you that the Ukrainian army could do with a few South Korean K9 howitzers here and a few K2 tanks there, among other things. As much as Putin wants to pretend nothing is happening, the reality is different. With his move in Ukraine, Putin has positioned himself squarely on the North Korean side. In doing so, Russia has broken a seemingly unbreakable international consensus, not to strengthen North Korea under any circumstances. And now, as you can see, everything indicates that he is doing exactly the opposite. Emboldened by the help of their new best friend Russia, the North Koreans could unleash an unprecedented escalation of tensions on the Korean peninsula. In the end, one of the reasons Pyongyang does not cause more headaches for its neighbors is because of its dependence on Western humanitarian aid. But with Russian oil and food and Chinese coal assured, they don't need much more to become a real fly in the ointment on a day at the beach. So you see, North Korea has a new best friend. Putin has already begun to help Kim Jong-un's regime as a reward for the massive shipment of artillery and missiles. And to top it off, he has claimed that he could send weapons and technical assistance to improve the North Korean ones. So with all this mess being created on our beloved Korean peninsula at the expense of these two dictators, the turn is now yours. Will Putin end up collaborating in North Korean ballistic and nuclear development? Will modern Russian fighters arrive in the North Korean Air Force for the first time in decades? Do you think South Korea will ultimately send weapons to Ukraine? This last question we will also address in a video that we will upload very soon here on VisualPolitik. But for now, we'd love to hear your opinion. So leave us your thoughts down here in the comments and let's start a debate. And very important, if you liked this video, please like it and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already done so. As always, thank you so very much for being there. All the best, I'll see you next time.